The galaxy launched its most powerful armada against Earth. Humanity defeated them before nightfall. The sky over Geneva tore open at 6:14 in the morning, not with fire, not yet, with silence. The kind of silence that comes right before something enormous decides you no longer matter. 3,000 starships bled out of a fold in space, staying themselves in concentric rings above the planet. And for 11 full seconds, no human being on Earth said a single word. Fleet Admiral Elena Voss stood on the observation deck of Command Bunker 7, staring at a tactical display that had simply stopped making sense. The numbers kept climbing. 3,000 became 3,100. 3,100 became 3,400. Somewhere in the coalition of 11 alien species now orbiting her homeworld, a war council was almost certainly congratulating itself on a battle already won. They had no idea what was still buried under the Pacific. But that part of the story hadn't happened yet. 3 days earlier, none of this had even seemed possible. 3 days earlier, the galaxy still believed humanity was alone. A curiosity. A species that had only just learned to whisper into the dark with radio signals nobody important had bothered to answer. The Threpsian ascendancy, the oldest and proudest of the void-faring civilizations, had spent 400 years cataloging every spacefaring race within 11,000 light-years. Humanity wasn't even in the ledger. They were a rumor, a blip. A species that had detonated a few fusion bombs and called it progress. That changed the moment the Cassiopeia Relay, a Threpsian scout vessel mapping the outer rim of Sol's asteroid belt, vanished without a distress call. Grand Marshal Calith Voro of the Threpsian Ascendancy did not believe in coincidence. He believed in provocation, and he believed in punishment. Within 6 hours of the relay's disappearance, he had convened the 11 houses, the loosest, most fragile alliance the galaxy had seen in a century, and asked them a single question. Would they join him in erasing a threat before it could become an inconvenience? 10 houses said yes almost immediately. Fear does that. It makes agreement easy. The 11th house, the quiet, insectile Drenn collective, said something stranger. Their ambassador, a translator drone speaking in a voice like wind through glass, simply said, "We have watched this species longer than any of you. We recommend caution." Nobody listened. Caution has never won a war council vote. But no one expected what happened next. While the 11 houses debated fleet formations and casualty tolerances as if humanity were a formality to be processed, Earth was doing something it had done for 80 years without telling a single star system: preparing. Project Hearthstone had begun in the aftermath of the Cold War, buried so deep in classified budgets that even most sitting presidents only received a partial briefing. Its premise was simple and, in hindsight, terrifyingly correct. Humanity was small, fragile, and alone in a universe that had given no evidence of kindness. If contact ever came, it might not come with open hands. So Earth built the insurance policy nobody was supposed to ever need. The Dreadnought Perseverance was not a warship in the way the Threpsians understood warships. Gleaming, announced, escorted by pomp and banners. It was 2.1 kilometers of matte black hull, resting in a trench 4 kilometers beneath the Pacific, wrapped in a stealth field developed from principles humanity's own scientists didn't fully understand for the first 30 years of the project. It had no name painted on its hull. It had never been photographed. Fewer than 400 people alive knew it existed, and every one of them had signed documents that made the Manhattan Project look like a garage sale. It had been waiting for 80 years. It was about to stop waiting. The council had made a terrible mistake, and they wouldn't understand how terrible until it was far too late to matter. When the 11 houses' combined armada dropped out of hyperspace above Earth, their sensors reported exactly what their intelligence had promised. A technologically adolescent civilization with a handful of orbital defense platforms, some aging nuclear submarines, and roughly the military sophistication of a species that had just discovered jet engines. Grand Marshal Voro looked at the readouts and felt something close to disappointment. He had prepared for a war. He had been given a formality. Broadcast the surrender terms, he ordered. Give them 1 hour. Down on Earth in the underground war room beneath NORAD. President Elena Marsh, no relation to Voss, though history would later tangle the names in 100 documentaries, listened to the translated ultimatum with her hands folded and her face unreadable. Surrender the planet's resources. Submit to Threpsian administrative oversight. Disarm all remaining primitive weapons platforms within 72 hours. She looked at Admiral Voss. Voss looked back and said 4 words that would end up carved into the base of a memorial 30 years later. Wake up the Perseverance. The truth stunned the entire galaxy, though it would take them years to fully understand what had actually happened that morning. At 6:31, 17 minutes after the Armada arrived, the Pacific Ocean split open above Trench Site 7. The Dreadnought Perseverance rose through 900 meters of seawater in complete silence, its stealth field dropping only once it cleared the surface, and for the first time in 80 years of secrecy, a piece of humanity's true capability was visible to eyes that weren't cleared to see it. It wasn't the size that broke the Armada's confidence, though the ship dwarfed anything in the Threpsian fleet by a factor of 6. It was the weapon's signature. Grand Marshal Voro's tactical officer, a young Threpsian named Ilvex who had graduated top of his class at the War Academy on Threp Prime, stared at his console and felt the color drain from every one of his 4 eyes. "Marshal," he said, voice cracking in a way Academy training hadn't prepared him for. "That's not a warship power signature, that's a star power signature." He wasn't exaggerating by much. The Perseverance reactor, built on physics humanity had reverse-engineered from decades of quiet, obsessive research into zero-point energy extraction, output more raw power than the Threpsian flagship's entire propulsion and weapons array combined. Fear took over the bridge of every ship in the Armada within the same 30 seconds. Because fear, more than any weapon, is what actually wins or loses wars before the first shot is fired. Everything changed in the next few seconds. Grand Marshal Voro, to his credit, did not panic. He had commanded fleets for 40 years, and 40 years of discipline does not evaporate simply because the numbers stop making sense. He gave the order any competent commander would give: concentrate fire, overwhelm the single large target before it could bring its weapons fully online, treat the Perseverance as the emergency it clearly was. 600 ships opened fire simultaneously. The Perseverance did not explode. It did not even shudder. A shell of rippling blue-white energy, a defense grid Earth scientists had spent 2 decades perfecting and had never once tested in live combat, absorbed the barrage and returned it as heat bleeding harmlessly into the void. Nobody knew what the humans were hiding. Not even the 400 people who'd built it. Not fully. Theory and battlefield reality are always different animals, and Earth's engineers watched their own creation perform beyond its blueprints, with the same disbelief as the aliens trying to destroy it. Admiral Voss, watching from Command Bunker 7, allowed herself exactly one breath of relief. Then she gave the order that would end the battle. Return fire. Minimum lethal force. We are not here to become monsters today. That order, restraint, even in overwhelming victory, would matter more to the galaxy's future than anyone in that bunker understood at the time. The Perseverance response was surgical, not annihilating. Its weapons, kinetic lances that bent space rather than simply crossing it, disabled propulsion and weapons systems on ship after ship, stripping the Armada of its ability to fight without stripping it of its ability to survive. 12 ships were destroyed outright. All of them vessels that had continued firing after the disable order should have registered. The rest went dark, drifting, crews alive and terrified inside hulls that no longer answered their commands. It took 40 minutes. 40 minutes, against a fleet the 11 houses had spent 6 months assembling. Against an Armada meant to erase a species from galactic memory before lunch. The Drenn Collective's ambassador, watching the battle unfold on relayed sensor data from a safe distance, made a note in his species' recorded history that would later become one of the most quoted lines in galactic diplomatic archives. "We told you caution. You gave them a reason instead to show you mercy." The Queen suddenly froze. Or rather, Threp Prime's ruling Matriarch, watching the battle's outcome arrive via emergency transmission, went utterly still in a way her attendants had never witnessed in 30 years of service. Her empire's flagship, crewed by some of the finest officers in the Ascendancy, sat dead in Earth orbit. Her Grand Marshal was alive only because a species he'd come to conquer had chosen not to kill him. She had one question for her advisors, and it was not the question any of them expected. What do they want in exchange for the survivors? That wasn't even the biggest surprise the day still held. Admiral Voss, given full authority by President Marsh to dictate terms to a defeated Armada, did not demand tribute. She did not demand territory, resources, or technology transfer. All the things the 11 Houses' own War Council had assumed would be Earth's price for victory, because that had always been the price they extracted from the defeated. Instead, she requested something almost embarrassingly small by galactic standards: full medical treatment access for every wounded alien crew member aboard the disabled fleet, delivered by Earth's own medical teams, and an open diplomatic channel, not a surrender document. A conversation. To begin the following week, Grand Marshal Voro, recovering aboard his crippled flagship with 3 fractured bones and a wound to his pride that would take considerably longer to heal, reportedly asked his aide to repeat the terms twice. Certain there had been a translation error. There hadn't been humanity, a species the galaxy had judged too young to matter, had just demonstrated that it possessed both the power to end the 11 Houses Armada and the restraint not to. In a galaxy where strength alone had always dictated respect, Earth had just rewritten the equation by adding a second variable nobody in the Ascendancy's 400 years of history had thought to measure. By the time the sun set over Geneva that evening, the same city where the silence had begun 11 hours earlier, the Armada that had come to erase humanity from galactic relevance sat dark and disabled in Earth's orbit, its crews receiving care from the species they'd been sent to conquer. Grand Marshal Voro would later become, against every expectation of his own career, the architect of the first formal treaty between Earth and the 11 Houses. The Drenn Collective's cautious ambassador would be proven right in every galactic history written afterward, and would take no pleasure at all in the vindication. Admiral Elena Voss stood once more on the observation deck of Command Bunker 7, as the last of the Armada's lights blinked into standby mode above her, and for the first time in 18 hours allowed herself to sit down. 80 years, she said quietly, to no one and everyone. 80 years of building something we prayed we'd never have to use. Her aide, standing beside her, watched the disabled fleet through the viewport. A galaxy's warning shot, answered not with Conquest, but with a hand extended after the fight was already over. "Ma'am," he said, "I think today we didn't just win a battle. I think we just told the whole galaxy who we actually are." Somewhere above them, in the cold dark between the stars, that message was already spreading faster than any fleet could ever travel, carried not by weapons, but by 3,000 crews who would go home and tell a very different story than the one their council had sent them to write. Humanity hadn't just survived first contact, it had defined, in a single day, exactly what it meant to be worth fearing, and exactly why fear was never going to be the last word.